One of the most ridiculous comments that I get all the time is, I hate ska music, but I love SKA Network / what you do. If you love what I do and the music I make, I hate to break it to you, but that means you just love ska. Now the problem is, people don't like the ska that they've heard, and they like to associate a very small handful of bands to what the entire genre can be, which is just a very, very false accusation to make on a genre that's so diverse. I really try to use this platform to push a lot of ska bands that people don't appreciate and ska bands that get overlooked a lot. And while adding bands to the playlist, I came across an idea of making a video where I kind of take covers that I've done and then take the inspirations and compare the two. Sometimes the inspirations are just a framework and sometimes they're a blatant rip, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. So that's exactly what this video is going to be. It's going to be me comparing covers I've done to the original songs that inspired me to make the covers sound like the way they do. But before we get started, make sure you hit that like and hit that subscribe. The subscription definitely helps me out, but it makes sure that you see the content that I put out. And hitting that like makes sure that the algorithm knows that people like this, so more people see it. But enough talking and preface, let's just get this thing going. So this cover is super interesting because when I first made it, I wasn't necessarily trying to sound exactly like this band with this one. This one is just definitely a big inspiration at the time. A Brazilian ska band called Abracadabra. So if you've never heard Abracadabra, there you go. Go check them out. They're super good friends and awesome people. And they put out a record a few years ago called Welcome, and that's just a really, really tight ska punk record. That little part right there, that little ba-ba-bum, 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 super interesting because that actually, I subconsciously ripped that from an Abracadabra song.
I've seen so many awful days, and I wonder if this life is for real. Such a lace, but I'm small and inside. I'm not worthy for a minute of your time.
Yeah, I totally did that. I didn't realize it at the time. I was listening to this song way later, and I was like, oh my gosh, I ripped off Abracadabra. Yeah, so the least y'all can do is go listen to Abracadabra. Considering that's like my second most viewed video, y'all will probably really enjoy this record if you really enjoyed that cover. Moving on. So I feel like this one is pretty obvious, but no one's commented it yet, which is surprising. Typically, someone always leaves a comment saying, this sounds like blank. And I'm always like, yes, you're absolutely right. But not one person did this. So I don't know if enough people just don't know this band, because they're pretty big in the UK. Or if no one's ever made the correlation, but I'm just going to play that band and let it speak for itself. Yeah, so I feel like that one is a lot more obvious than other ones, but I guess no one said it. But yeah, I'll throw it out there. The Skints are incredible. When I first heard the Skints, I dug them, but I didn't listen to them too much. I played them every now and again, but like about a month ago, I got really into that record, Swimming Lessons, I believe. It's just a phenomenal record. I really love how they're mixing like the trad ska, like the reggae vibes with punk. I feel like that's something that hasn't been done a lot in the few bands that I've heard do it. I'm just not a big fan of it. And they just get really creative with like how they use the keys to like fill texture. I just love everything that they're doing. It's really creative and great. And the songs are super catchy, make me want to dance a lot. 10 out of 10 record, go check it out. That one is actually, I can trace that one back pretty easily to what inspired me to write that song. Or arrange that song in that way, I should say, because I didn't write it. I wish I wrote it. Yeah, so there's 2 tracks that I chose to show for this one. One of them is from a band that I don't know how I discovered them, but I've been listening to them forever. They're actually one of the first bands I ever saved on Spotify when I made the account in 2011. So this band's called Western Special. They don't have many monthly listeners, and I've never heard of anyone talk about this band, but they're really dope. To my understanding, they're from France. They were just like a ska, jazz, traditional ska band from the early 2000s or so. I like this song because the vibe at the beginning is this very like danceable, like Latin vibe, and then it just switches straight into this trad ska vibe, and when it hits, oh my gosh, that groove hits so hard. So here, right here. Yeah, and that's like the most ska rhythm of all, is that like that drum beat, that skuts, skuts, skuts. When you have the hi-hat open, hitting on the ands, and the hi-hat closes when the snare hits, and the snare hits the same time as the bass. So you get that skuts, skuts, skuts. That vibe, that. This band and a few other bands that I'm going to go over later in the video are huge inspirations for that traditional ska feel. But specifically for the new Super Mario Bros. Feel, that back half, there is an actual track that really inspired exactly how I wanted that to sound like. Now let's compare this closing theme of the cover to the track that I was inspired by. So I think it's clear to see where a lot of my inspiration comes from, especially with like this track, with what I just played. They're very alike, especially in timbre. And when I say timbre, I mean that's the sound that you're hearing, like why the guitar sounds that way, why the keys sound that way, like what reverb is doing to affect the sound. It's really hard to imitate that stuff purely, but I try my best to, and I think that's why I get the sound that I do in the covers that I make. And there's a great quote that Igor Stravinsky, the composer of the Firebird, one of the most profound composers of the Romantic era, once said, "Good composers borrow, great composers steal." That being said, on to the next cover. While on the topic of the ska, jazz feel, and Western Special, I want to point out another song that was heavily inspired by Western Special.
If I could begin to be half of what you think of me, I could do about anything. I could even learn how to love.
I remember when I was working on that song with my friend Court, I literally sent them this song saying, this is what I want this to sound like, and then I demoed it out. And that's what we went for, and I'm pretty sure I did a pretty good job of nailing that sound. Instrumentation's pretty much exactly the same. The tempo is roughly the same. A big thing that determines this, I think, versus a lot of other covers I've done is that it's swung. I don't really swing a lot of covers because the rhythm of ska is not a swung rhythm normally, but you can swing it. And I think that's why it's such a really dope and versatile genre, because you're able to do things like that, like completely swing everything, and it's still in the vein of ska. So instead of it being like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and ba 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 ba, now you have the do ba do ba do ba do ba ga 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 ba ba. Another thing I wanted to point out is the horns. I don't know if you noticed, but the horns are playing all of the offbeats. Now it's not sticking out to you because it's not the main melody, so it's being mixed in with the guitar and the piano. But that little bit of texture makes a huge difference in the timbre, and a lot of traditional ska and ska jazz do that.
I'm dreaming that I'm in your arms. I'd like to look deeply into your eyes. And when I see the way you act, I'm wondering when I'm coming back. I
just thought that'd be a cool one to point out moving on to the next song. For the amount of time someone has said that this sounds like Streetlight Manifesto and my stuff sounds literally nothing like Streetlight Manifesto, oh my goodness. But there actually is a time where I tried to sound exactly like Streetlight Manifesto. I think this one's pretty obvious what I was going for, that very Streetlight Manifesto sound. In fact, that little fill right there is a blatant rip. I changed the entire melody of the original song, that ba-ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da-da, that last time, that ba-da-da-ba-da-da-da-dum, that's a blatant rip of.
I will never defend the man who make amends with the enemy's friends. I will never pretend.
But yeah, I think it's pretty blatant and pretty obvious. There's not much to dissect in that one. Other than that, a lot of it is like, Streetlight loves to play at a lot faster tempos, like around like 240, which is where I track this around. Another thing that Streetlight Manifesto really loves to do is not have all of their horns always playing in unison. There will be parts where only the trumpet and alto sax will play one thing, and then there will be like a call and response like the bari sax and trombone. Or it'll be like all of the saxes playing one rhythm while the brass plays another rhythm. They have 5 horns, so they really utilize the textures and different combinations of horns to create different sounds. Which helps them get away with the fact that all of their songs kind of sit at the same tempo and are in one of 3 different keys and always do kind of the same stuff harmonically. And there's honestly nothing wrong with that. I'm not ranking on them. It's just a fact that a lot of their songs kind of have a lot of the same structure. But because Thomas is so creative with how he uses the horns and things like that, it kind of just doesn't matter. But that's a big thing I've always noticed with their music, so that's something I try to do a lot with this cover, trying to basically isolate different horn parts and have lots of call and response sections. We can't forget that really brassy trombone tone, too. Not much to dissect there. Streetlight really loves doing that trade-off, call and response type thing, and not having all the horns play everything in unison. Now this next band is not even a ska band, but they definitely were a huge inspiration for me for writing like punk music. I first got into going to shows around 10th grade, which is 2010, and during that time the whole pop-punk emo revival thing was huge. Bands like the Wonder Years, Title Fight, Citizen, Basement, The World Is a Beautiful Place. I could keep going on and on and on about all of those bands from back then. And when I first started getting into music that wasn't just ska, Title Fight was one of the first bands I got into. With the sound for this cover, I was focusing very much to nail that very shed to floral green era of Title Fight. When it comes to punk music, I'm not trying to go for that like 90s pop punk sound with my guitar tones. I'm really always trying to go towards this like 2010s pop punk and emo sound. I just dig it better. I think it sounds a lot better. It sounds a lot more warmer. When people hear my music, I want them to think of Fender amps. I don't want them to think of Gibson. I don't want them to think of Line 6. I want them to think of Vox. And I think a lot of ska bands are always hyper focused on having so many horns and all of the horn stuff that they neglect a lot of the guitar stuff. I actually came to the realization recently that all of the ska bands that I love all play through Fender. And they all really care about their guitar tone. I feel like a lot of ska bands play at a tempo that's very representative of this. And not enough bands play at a tempo that's representative to this. And that's something I really loved about this early 2010s pop punk emo sound. is that the song's grooved. Like, you know, they focus more on the groove than it being fast. And I think it's super important. Not only that, but they really focus on syncopation, which I think that's why it merges so well with ska. Like that thing that Title Fight loves doing this, and a lot of these bands like Citizen and Basement of that era love doing this. And that's when they delay the hit. Then you expect the hit to hit on one, but it hits on and instead. And that's something I tried replicating when I did this Rainbow Road cover, because I was really going for that like Title Fight sound. But yeah, I figured I'd throw that one in there because there are quite a few covers where I do aim for this Title Fight sound, and I think it's very influential, if not way more influential than most ska bands are, to me writing ska punk. I think it's painstakingly obvious at this point that Jeff Rosenstock is one of my biggest inspirations in the world of ska punk. But in case y'all still can't get it by listening to my covers, yeah, Jeff Rosenstock and all of his ska-related projects have been a huge inspiration to what I do. Recently I did a cover of Came Out Swinging by the Wonder Years, and a few people guessed it, but not many people got it. In fact, a lot of the Wonder Years fans and a lot of pop punk kids were like reaching out to me saying that they hate ska, like they really hate ska, but they love this. And my response was literally sending them this ASOB song because it's straight up a rip. It's like, I can't even lie about this one. I'm just gonna play the two back to back and you're gonna see exactly what I mean. I don't really have to talk about this at all. Yeah, that one just straight up, I heard that and I was like, I'm gonna make this sound exactly like So Let's Go Nowhere. And that's exactly what I did. But I'm just gonna go ahead and end it there. There's a lot more bands I can compare to and talk about, but if this is something you really like, I'll do a part 2. I know everyone's fishing for new content to watch during this time because we're all stuck inside. And I'm using OBS, which is the streaming software that I use to stream on Twitch. By the way, go follow me on Twitch. That's something I do now. But yeah, I used OBS to record this, which allowed me to basically both record and edit at the same time and get all of this done in about an hour and a half. Which an average cover takes me 2 days, and my last video essay, The Punk Rock Music Theory, took me 2 weeks. So yeah, the quality is much lower. But it's bonus content that I was not planning on putting out that I had the idea of and was able to knock out real quick because of this. So if this is something that you like, let me know. I'll keep doing more of them. I'll keep recording them in this way. And if there's any other things you want to see me vlog about, I can definitely vlog about more stuff. And I might even start recording these live and then chop them up later. Let me know if this all sounds good to y'all. But yeah, thank you so much for watching and enjoy this outro video that is in way more better quality than this entire video.
A big thank you to all of you who've been watching and giving me views. Don't forget to like and subscribe and to follow on platforms alike. The biggest thank you to everyone.